Emma adjusted the final candle until its flame stood straight, steady, a tiny beacon against the dim dining room. The table looked beautiful, soft linen, crystal glasses, the good silverware she'd kept wrapped for special occasions. She had spent the day preparing slow roasted lamb with rosemary, the champagne Jason once called his favorite, and a playlist of the songs they'd danced to on their wedding night. 5 years. It wasn't the grandest milestone, but it mattered to her. It was supposed to matter to them. She smoothed her dress, palms lingering over the fabric like it could calm her heartbeat. For weeks, she had sensed something brittle between them, late nights at the office, glances at his phone, a tone she didn't recognize when he spoke to her. Tonight she wanted to remind them both of who they used to be. She wanted to believe there was still a version of Jason who saw her. The door opened with a burst of cold air and cologne. Jason stepped inside, still on his phone, muttering about a contractor. He hung up mid-sentence and kissed her cheek distractedly. "Smells great," he said, his eyes already scanning the table. "You didn't have to go all out." "I wanted to," she replied softly. She wanted to ask if he remembered the first anniversary, the small apartment, the single candle, the cheap wine. How happy they'd been with almost nothing. But his attention had already moved on. They sat across from each other. Emma poured the champagne, the bubbles rising like a promise. Jason raised his glass with a perfunctory smile. "To 5 years," he said. "To 5 years," she echoed. Then, as casually as if he were handing over a grocery list, he slid an envelope across the table. Emma blinked. "What's this?" "Just something I need you to look over." He took a sip of champagne. "A prenup. Well, technically postnup. My lawyer says it's smart. With the new business about to take off, we need to be clear. It's just a formality." She didn't touch the envelope. "A prenup? Now?" Jason chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Come on, it's just legal stuff. Protects us both." She stared at the crisp white rectangle. The meal she'd made, the candles she'd lit, the hopes she'd had for tonight, they all shrank to the edges of the table. Her gift was love. His was paperwork. "I made you a cake," she said quietly. "What?" He looked confused. "A lemon cake. Your favorite. And a card." Her voice almost broke. "It says, 'I still believe in us.'" Jason shifted, frowning. "You're overreacting. This doesn't change anything between us. You know how business is. I'm about to get serious with money. This is just prudent." Prudent. The word landed like a slap. He had brought her a contract to sign at an anniversary dinner and called it prudent. She pressed her fingers together under the table to keep them from trembling. "I'll look at it later," she said at last, her voice steady. "See? That's why I love you," he said with relief. "You're reasonable?" Emma nodded, but inside something had shifted. He thought her silence meant agreement. He thought her calm was compliance. He still didn't see the change blooming quietly in her chest. Dinner limped on in strained conversation. Jason talked about property deals, influencer campaigns, a potential podcast. She listened, answering in soft murmurs, while her mind drifted to another version of herself, the one who once wrote stories late into the night, the one who believed in partnership, not transactions, when he reached for a second helping of lamb. She wondered if he noticed how she didn't eat. When he poured more champagne, she wondered if he tasted the bitterness in the air. He didn't. He was already checking his phone under the table. After dessert, Jason moved to the couch, beer in hand, muttering about a game he wanted to catch. He didn't notice Emma clearing the plates alone. He didn't see the way she paused at the kitchen counter, staring at the envelope like it might speak. She picked it up. The paper was heavy, expensive. His lawyer had prepared it with care. Clauses, assets, signatures, neat lines carving their life into his and hers. Her contributions invisible, her sacrifices unnamed, her name used only as a placeholder for liability. She opened a drawer and took out a blank sheet of stationery. For a long time she stood at the counter, pen hovering, heart pounding. Then she wrote a single sentence. "You brought me a contract. I'm returning it with a signature and a decision." She folded the note, slipped it into the envelope, and sealed it again. The paper felt colder now, sharper, like something she could cut herself on if she wasn't careful. In the living room, Jason had fallen asleep, the beard tilting precariously on the arm of the couch. His mouth hung open slightly. He looked smaller when he slept, but not softer. She wondered how long she had been mistaking stillness for safety. Emma blew out the candles one by one. The flames flickered, shrank, and disappeared, leaving trails of smoke curling into the dim light. She gathered the envelope, held it against her chest for a moment, and felt something inside her harden, not into stone, but into resolve. She wasn't going to cry tonight. She wasn't going to plead. She wasn't going to sign her name to a future that erased her in the silence, with only the faint glow of dying embers from the candles. Emma felt the first quiet edge of freedom press against her skin. This night wasn't the end of their marriage. It was the beginning of her becoming. Morning crept in through the blinds, slicing the bedroom into pale stripes of light and shadow. Jason was still asleep, his phone clutched loosely in his hand, screen glowing with unread messages. Emma lay on her side, watching him, the envelope from the night before resting on the nightstand like a third presence in the room. She hadn't touched it since she sealed it, but she could feel it there, humming with quiet finality. She turned her gaze to the ceiling. In the stillness, memories rose, uninvited, insistent like film reels flickering to life. There was a time, not long ago, when mornings smelled of coffee and possibility. She used to wake up early to write before work, laptop balanced on her knees, the hum of words a secret joy. She had a novel half finished, characters whispering in her head, scenes unfolding like stained glass windows. Back then, her friends would call her the storyteller, the one who always had a new idea, a new draft, a spark in her eyes. Then she married Jason. It wasn't sudden. It was gradual, like water wearing down stone. Little sacrifices at first, skipping a writing workshop to attend one of his networking events, turning down a small freelance assignment to help him stage a property. He was charming, ambitious, a man who spoke about the future in sweeping gestures. He called her his anchor, his quiet genius. He said he needed her by his side to make it all happen. She believed him, believed in them. One by one, her priorities shifted. Her manuscript sat untouched for weeks, then months. She let her domain name lapse. She gave her weekends to open houses and social mixers, her weekdays to spreadsheets and emails she wasn't paid to send. When friends texted to meet for coffee, she said she was busy. Eventually, they stopped asking. She didn't notice at first how small her life had become, how quiet, how she'd learned to measure her worth by his milestones, her mood by his approval. Jason liked her agreeable. He liked her soft edges, the way she listened without interrupting. He liked that she never asked for much. He would smile at her across a crowded room, and she would smile back, not realizing she was fading, becoming a backdrop to his main event. The prenup had been a shock, yes, but not a surprise. It wasn't the first time he'd drawn a line between them. It was just the first time he'd put it in writing. Emma swung her legs out of bed, her feet finding the cold floor. She padded to the kitchen, the house silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. She poured herself coffee and stared out the window at the small garden she'd planted. Even the plants looked tired. She tried to remember the last time she'd written something just for herself. Not a caption for Jason's listings, not an email to a client. Real writing. the kind that made her feel alive. She could single quotes T dot. She set down the mug and pressed her palms flat against the counter, grounding herself. This wasn't just about a document. It wasn't about money. It was about erasure, hers. She thought back to her wedding day, standing in the bathroom mirror with a veil pinned to her hair, repeating to herself, "He sees me. He really sees me." How desperately she had wanted that to be true. How she had built her choices on that hope. Now, 5 years later, she saw the truth as clearly as the sunlight creeping across the kitchen floor. He hadn't seen her. Not once. He'd seen a version of her that was useful, supportive, malleable. And she had let herself become that version. Until last night. Something in her had shifted. Not a loud break, but a quiet opening. A stirring like the first tremor of a seed pushing through soil. She felt it now, faint but steady. A pulse she'd forgotten was hers. She walked to her old desk tucked in the corner of the spare room. Dust coated the keyboard. A stack of notebooks sat unopened. She brushed her fingers over them, and the sight of her own handwriting on the covers felt like touching a stranger's face. She opened one. Inside was a scene she had written 3 years ago, a fragment of a story about a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, deciding whether to jump or to fly. Emma read the words slowly. They were raw, unpolished, but alive. She felt a pang in her chest, not of regret, but of recognition. She sat down. The chair creaked under her weight. She picked up a pen. At first, nothing came. Her mind was a static of years lost, of dinners made, of envelopes handed across tables. But then a sentence slipped out, thin but certain. She wrote it. Then another, and another. The words weren't about Jason. They weren't about revenge. They were about her, a voice she hadn't heard in so long she'd nearly forgotten its sound. She paused and looked out the window. The sun had risen higher now, warming the glass. Jason was still asleep. The house was still. But something inside her was moving. The prenup hadn't broken her. It had named the truth she'd been avoiding. She wasn't a partner in her own life anymore. She was a footnote, and footnotes don't get endings. They get erased. She wasn't going to be erased, not anymore. She closed the notebook gently. Her heart felt different, heavier and lighter at the same time. She could sense a line forming inside her, a boundary she hadn't had the courage to draw before. This wasn't about leaving yet. It wasn't about shouting or slamming doors. It was about remembering herself, about waking up. She stood, smoothing her hair, and glanced once more at the envelope on the knitstand as she passed the bedroom door. Jason stirred but didn't wake. He wouldn't notice the shift yet, but she did. For the first time in years, she felt the edges of her own life, and they were sharp enough to hold. Emma didn't announce her next move. She didn't slam doors or demand explanations. Instead, she folded the envelope Jason had given her and tucked it into her bag, not out of compliance, but as evidence that Monday she took the morning off. Jason assumed she was home, probably journaling or rearranging the spice rack. He didn't ask. He rarely did anymore. Her first stop was a law office tucked between a florist and an insurance agency. The building wasn't fancy, no marble floors or gold plaques, but the name printed on the glass door gave her a flicker of confidence. May Lawson. Family and asset law. May had once been Lena's aunt's paralegal. Now she had her own practice, and a reputation for making messy situations. Cleaner. May greeted her with a firm handshake and curious eyes. "You said it's urgent?" Emma nodded and opened her bag. She pulled out the prenup, unsigned, and placed it on the desk like it was made of glass. "My husband gave me this on our anniversary." May's brows rose. "That's timely. I didn't sign it," Emma said, "but I want to know what it means and what it says about him." May read silently for a while. Her expression shifted from neutral to tight-lipped. When she looked up, her voice had changed. Did you know your name was removed from the LLC paperwork for 3 of his properties? Emma froze. What? May turned the document toward her. He listed himself as the sole owner on the filings. You're not mentioned in any of the contracts, not even as a secondary partner. Emma felt heat rise in her chest. He told me we were co-owners. We used my credit to get those deals approved. May nodded. Exactly. He used your credit, your clean financial history, but none of the risk is on him, and none of the reward is yours. Emma blinked slowly. Is that legal? Unfortunately, yes. If you weren't named and didn't sign ownership documents, it's murky at best. But you might have leverage, especially if he used your information without consent on any financial paperwork. Emma sat back. The room felt smaller, her lungs tighter. She thanked May, asked for a retainer quote, and left with trembling hands, not from fear, but fury. Her next stop was a cozy corner cafe with brick walls and velvet chairs, the kind of place she used to write in. Behind the counter stood Lena, her college roommate turned mortgage broker. She wore her usual red lipstick and a look of mild surprise. Emma? Lena came around the counter and hugged her. You look like you're either about to cry or burn something down. Maybe both, Emma said. Managing a small smile, they grabbed a corner booth. And Emma laid it all out. The prenup, the lawyer visit, the shifting of assets. Lena listened closely, then pulled out her laptop. Let's run your name through the credit inquiry logs, Lena said. Just to see what pops up? Minutes later, Lena's eyes narrowed. He applied for bridge loans in your name twice. For high-risk properties that didn't even turn a profit. Emma's breath hitched. I didn't sign anything. Lena turned the screen. He forged it, these digital signatures. They're copy-pasted from an old refinance document you did sign years ago. He's been using it like a stamp. Emma felt the room tilt slightly. Her hands gripped the table's edge. So he's not just cutting me out. He's gambling with my name. Lena reached across and squeezed her hand. You need to get ahead of this. You need to protect yourself, legally and financially. This isn't just betrayal. This is fraud, Emma nodded, the word thudding in her chest. Fraud, not just neglect. Not just emotional distance. He had built his empire with her silent credit, and now he wanted to fence her out entirely. That night, back home, she went into the attic, a place Jason rarely bothered with. She dug through old boxes until she found a shoebox labeled in faded ink, Before I Was a Wife. Inside were notes. Poems, a USB drive, and at the very bottom, a folded letter addressed to herself. Her handwriting looked younger, rounder, full of hope. Dear future me, it began. Don't forget the dream, a book with your name on the spine. A small cabin near the water. Mornings full of writing, nights full of warmth. Don't let love cost you your voice. She read the letter twice, then 3 times. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. This wasn't sadness. This was remembering. She had loved Jason with open palms. She had traded poems for profit, stories for spreadsheets, trust for silence. And he had used every inch of it. Not with rage, not with violence, but with calm, calculated selfishness. He hadn't just taken her for granted. He had taken her for fuel. And now that he was rising, he was ready to cut the rope that tied them together. But he had underestimated one thing. Emma hadn't disappeared. She'd just been quiet until... Now she folded the letter gently and placed it back in the box. Not because she needed a reminder, but because she wouldn't need one again. Tomorrow, she'd meet May again and sign the paperwork to protect her credit. She'd have Lena document every forged application. She'd start the trail, the one that led not just away from Jason, but back to herself, The woman who once dreamed with fire in her chest was stirring again. The woman who wrote letters to her future self, who believed she had something to say, was still here. Emma looked at the calendar hanging on the wall. The next day was blank. No events. No meetings. She wrote one word on it: begin. The house smelled like vanilla, buttercream, and deception. Emma stood in the kitchen, frosting the last layer of Jason's birthday cake. 3 tiers, lemon sponge with blackberry compote, his favorite. She smoothed the icing with careful precision, each stroke a quiet reminder to herself. She could do anything. Even this. Even smile through a party she no longer believed in. Outside, fairy lights twinkled in the backyard. Guests were arriving, Jason's colleagues, his gym buddies. A few real estate influencers he followed more than he followed her. Emma had sent the invites, arranged the catering, prepped the playlist. Everything looked perfect, just like she used to try to be. She wore the navy blue dress he once complimented, the one he said made her look put together. Her hair curled just enough, makeup light, smile practiced. No one would see the paperwork tucked away in her office drawer, divorce petition filed 2 days ago under her maiden name. No one would know this was a goodbye in costume. Jason appeared in the hallway, adjusting his cufflinks, grinning like a man who thought he'd won. You didn't have to go all out, he said. Surveying the setup, Emma handed him a glass of champagne. It's your birthday, she said sweetly. Of course I did. He kissed her cheek, oblivious. You're amazing. I knew you'd come around. The words hung there, unspoken between them. The prenup. He thought her silence meant surrender. He didn't know it was strategy. Guests flooded in, arms full of wine bottles and loud laughter. The house filled with noise, the kind that masked tension beautifully. Jason was in his element, clinking glasses, making toasts, reciting the same story about his upcoming business launch for the 5th time that week. Emma moved through the crowd like a gracious hostess, answering questions with practiced ease. So, how's married life? Someone asked. Productive, Emma answered with a smile so soft. It didn't draw attention. They laughed, moved on as the night deepened. Jason pulled her into a toast. To success, he said, raising his glass. To new ventures. And to the woman who stood beside me when no one else would. The crowd cheered. Emma clinked her glass gently and sipped. She wanted to laugh, not from joy, but at the irony of it all. He was toasting her loyalty with the same breath he used to try and erase her from his future. Later, as candles flickered on the cake she'd made by hand, everyone sang. Jason's face glowed under the light. He made a wish, cut the cake, and kissed her in front of everyone. See? He whispered, smug. We're good. I knew it. Emma smiled. You always think you know everything. He laughed, not catching the undertone. That's why I'm building an empire? Yes, she thought. An empire built on forged documents and borrowed credit. As the last guest trickled out and the kitchen returned to silence. Jason unbuttoned his shirt and poured himself a final drink. That was great, he said. You were great. Emma leaned against the doorway, watching him. I'm glad you think so, she said softly. He walked over, snaked his arm around her waist. I knew you'd come around about the prenup. You're smart like that. She tilted her head and kissed his cheek gently. Her lips barely touched his skin. You'll find out just how much, she murmured. Jason chuckled, already half drunk. That's what I like about you? Always full of surprises? Emma said nothing. He turned on the TV and collapsed onto the couch, already focused on highlights from a football game. Emma cleared the empty glasses from the counter, loaded the dishwasher, and wiped the cake crumbs off the marble like she had done every birthday before this. But this time, it wasn't an act of love. It was closure. Later, when the lights were off and Jason snored beside her in bed, Emma stared at the ceiling. She remembered the version of herself who used to bake from joy, not duty, who used to host dinners with stories and laughter, not tight smiles and silence. That woman had been buried under years of subtle dismissal, brushed aside like a dish left too long in the sink, but she was back now, not louder. Just clearer. She turned toward Jason's sleeping form, watched the rise and fall of his chest. He looked peaceful, like a man who had no idea the ground beneath him had already shifted. She didn't hate him. Not exactly. She pitied the fact that he never once thought she was capable of leaving. He had bet everything on her silence and miscalculated the cost. The birthday banner still fluttered faintly in the hallway. Gold foil letters spelling out, "Another year wiser." Emma almost laughed. The printer clicked to life, spitting out spreadsheets with ink still warm. Emma stood over the dining table, each document lined up like evidence in a trial. Bank statements, tax returns, mortgage files. She was building her paper fortress, one that told the real story behind Jason's empire. She needed this to be clean, legal, precise, not fueled by rage, but by facts. May had given her a checklist. Lena had flagged the accounts. Emma was just connecting dots now. She opened his laptop, the one he always left open like a trophy, and searched through old folders. Nothing labeled. Nothing obvious, but Jason wasn't as clever as he thought. In a folder named Contracts Old was a subfolder called Q1 Client Touchpoints. Harmless enough. Inside hundreds of PDFs and email threads, receipts, drafts, some junk. And then one subject line stopped her cold. Late night follow-up. Don't tell the boss. It was sent from Sierra, the 20-something assistant Jason had hired last spring. The one who called him Jays in meetings and wore red lipstick like armor. Emma clicked it open. Last night was unexpected. I didn't think you'd actually show up. Thanks for listening and for the wine. You're not like other husbands. The air in the room changed. Not colder. Not warmer. Just thinner. Emma read slowly, carefully. Another message. Then another. They weren't explicit. No confessions of love. No motel addresses. But the subtext curled like smoke. Flirty jokes, private memes. Midnight gratitude for being her safe space. He hadn't crossed the line with his body yet. Just his intention. But what burned more than the messages was the quiet entitlement behind them. Jason didn't even bother to hide it. He used her name for loans, erased her from property titles, and now he whispered comfort to another woman, thinking Emma wouldn't notice because Jason thought Emma was still asleep, still agreeable, still grateful to be Mrs. Preston. But what he didn't know was that she had stopped being his anything the moment he handed her a contract on their anniversary. Emma stared at the screen. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. There was no big betrayal to absorb, just the final piece clicking into place. This wasn't about Sierra, or infidelity, or even secrets. It was about a man who never once thought. He owed her an apology. Not for the prenup, not for the forged signatures. Not for the years of taking and taking and taking. He had simply assumed she would endure it. That she'd nod and adjust and smile through every cold paper and cold night. And the truth was, she almost had. Emma closed the laptop. She didn't slam it, didn't scream. Instead, she walked to the bedroom closet and pulled out a fireproof lockbox from the top shelf. Inside was a folded envelope labeled in her own handwriting, "If I ever forget." She hadn't seen it in years. Inside was a list she'd made before the wedding. Not a dream list. Not this time. This was a boundary list. If he lies about money, if he makes you feel invisible, if he laughs when you cry, if he cheats emotionally, if you forget how to recognize yourself in the mirror. She read the last line twice. If you forget how to recognize yourself in the Mirror Emma stood and walked to the bathroom. She flicked on the light and stared at her reflection. Her face was calm, her posture straight, her eyes awake. She wasn't lost anymore. She wasn't naive. She wasn't waiting for him to change. Jason's laughter echoed from the other room, probably watching reels again. Sending a flame emoji to Sierra. Thinking nothing could touch him. Emma folded the paper and placed it back in the lockbox. The final straw hadn't been the pre-NUP. It hadn't even been the assistant. It was the absence of remorse. The confidence he carried that no matter what he did, she would stay. That's what ended it, that night. She slid into bed beside him like nothing had changed, but everything had. He leaned over, kissed her shoulder, and mumbled, "Glad we're back to normal?" Emma looked at the ceiling. "So am I," she whispered, but the normal he was dreaming of, she'd already burned it down. Emma ironed her dress that morning like it was any other day. Soft gray cotton, clean lines, nothing dramatic. Her hair pulled into a loose twist. No red lips. No war paint. Just clarity. On the kitchen counter sat a familiar cream envelope, the one Jason had handed her weeks ago, heavy with expectation. She had kept it not out of sentiment, but out of purpose. Today, it would carry something else. Inside it now were 2 cleanly signed divorce papers. May had reviewed them. Everything had been accounted for. The assets, the forged signatures, the debts in Emma's name now reassigned to Jason's. It had taken quiet work and patience. But that's the thing about silence. It moves like water, slowly wearing down even the strongest rock. Emma slid the envelope into her leather tote. She checked the time. Jason had a brunch with colleagues at the patio cafe on Linden Street. He'd sent her an invite, half-hearted, assuming she wouldn't come. She never joined him on business. Socials, her presence wasn't brand consistent. He once joked that today wasn't about his brand. It was about hers. She walked into the cafe just as they were ordering mimosas. Jason was mid-laugh, elbow deep in a story about flipping a lakeside property. 3 suited men and 1 woman sat around him, nodding, laughing, clinking glasses. He looked up and froze. "Emma?" His tone held confusion wrapped in a smile that started to wilt the second she sat down across from him. "I won't stay," she said calmly, placing the envelope on the table. "I just wanted to return something." Jason blinked. His hand hovered near the envelope like it might bite. What is it?" Emma stood, adjusted her tote. "Open it." He slid his finger under the flap, expecting. Who knows? A note. A romantic gesture. One last attempt, but what he found was the opposite. His eyes scanned the page. Then again, the silence at the table grew louder. The woman to his right glanced over his shoulder. Her brows lifted. Jason looked up, mouth slightly open. "Emma, wait. Happy anniversary," she said. Then she walked away. No tears, no drama. Just heels on pavement and a final goodbye stitched into every step. Behind her, a fork dropped. Someone whispered, "Oh, wow." But Emma didn't look back. She didn't need to. Later that afternoon, she sat in her small home office, no longer just a room with a desk, but now a launch pad. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then began to type. The first lie was the silence. That was the title of her first blog post. She wasn't interested in dragging Jason through digital mud. She didn't name names. She didn't vent. She wrote about how betrayal doesn't always roar. Sometimes it creeps in with paperwork, smiles, and quiet erasure. She wrote about identity, how easy it is to lose when love is conditional. About remembering the sound of her own voice. She published the post with her full name, Emma Reed Preston. No pen names. No usernames. Just her. The next morning, the post had 87 shares. By lunch, 2,000. By nightfall, Over 10,000 likes. Dozens of messages, mostly women. This is my story too. I left after reading this. Thank you for giving words to what I couldn't explain. She wrote again the next day. Then again. Short entries. Honest ones. She didn't dramatize. She told the truth. About the prenup. The forged documents. The moment she kissed her husband on the cheek while silently planning her exit, each post became a stone in a quiet, rising wave. One comment stood out more than the rest. You're not a whisper anymore. Emma, you're a wave. She stared at that line for a long time, because that's exactly what it felt like. The woman Jason once dismissed as soft, sensitive, naive, she had become something else entirely. Not louder, just undeniable. A week later, a journalist reached out, then a podcast, then a publishing inquiry. Emma took her time. She wasn't chasing headlines. She was anchoring her truth. Meanwhile, Jason stayed quiet. She assumed he'd read the blog, probably through gritted teeth, probably with Sarah at his side, asking if it was really about him. Emma didn't care. She wasn't writing for him. She was writing for every version of herself who had stayed quiet. For the girl who gave up her book dreams. For the wife who baked birthday cakes while being erased from contracts. For the woman who used to double-guess her own instincts. Now, she signed with purpose. Her name wasn't just on the divorce papers. It was on a story that finally belonged to her. It started with a comment, a nameless account beneath one of Emma's blog posts. This reads like emotional fiction. Pretty words, zero facts. Then another, this time under a shared excerpt on a women's forum. People will do anything for attention, especially ex-wives with time on their hands. She didn't need to trace the IP. The language was Jason's smug, dismissive, and just vague enough to keep his hands clean. He wouldn't call her out directly. That wasn't his style. He preferred back channels, rumor drips, and plausible deniability. To him, the damage always mattered more than the proof. Emma smiled, because he didn't know what she'd held on to all these years, back when they were newly married, dreaming big over coffee and Pinterest boards. Jason had begged her to help build their brand. You're the word girl, he'd said, and just the face. So Emma bought the domain name, PrestonPropertiesCo.com, and every variant she could think of. She set up the mailing list, reserved the Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn handles. Even made the logo. Jason never bothered with the back end. That was Emma's thing. He just showed up for the photo shoots. Now, in the middle of his passive-aggressive smear campaign, he tried to revive that brand, unaware he no longer had access. His assistant emailed her politely, "Hi, Emma. Jason asked if you could transfer the site credentials. We're refreshing the Preston Properties identity this quarter." Emma didn't respond. She logged into the dashboard, rechecked her ownership. Everything's still intact, the site, the socials. Even the newsletter of 3,000 subscribers who still remembered their renovation tips from 5 years ago. She didn't want revenge. She wanted clarity. That afternoon, she posted a single quote on the homepage. Don't hand someone a prenup when they gave you their whole heart. E.R.P. No photos. No accusations. No SHTAGs. Just that dot within hours. Traffic spiked. By midnight. Screenshots of the site circled every real estate forum. Her blog post from 2 weeks ago, the one where she described their anniversary dinner, was reshared thousands of times. Some called it art, others called it strategy. Emma called it freedom. Jason called twice. She let it ring. Then came the email. What are you doing? This is my company. Emma replied with one line. Check the LLC paperwork. You never filed it. He hadn't, she remembered, because she had offered to do it herself and he waved her off, saying that stuff doesn't matter until we're big. Now, they were big, just not in the way he imagined. She never posted another word. She didn't gloat, didn't explain. She simply left the quote up and let the silence do the rest. In the days that followed, other women began quoting her line on Twitter bios, Instagram captions, even Etsy mugs. Don't hand someone a prenup when they gave you their whole heart. It wasn't a scream. It was an echo. Jason tried to pivot, rename the company, rebrand with a different slogan. But the internet remembered. Screenshots lived longer than apologies. Emma wasn't trying to destroy him. She just stopped protecting him, and in doing so, she protected herself. Emma didn't write with the intention of becoming known. She wrote to become whole. Her blog, once a quiet corner of the internet, had taken on a life of its own. Every post was a breadcrumb, not leading readers to drama, but to dignity. Her inbox was no longer filled with promotions or bills. It was letters, real letters, from women with trembling fingers and untold stories. I thought I was alone. You said what I never could. You helped me walk away. She read each one slowly, never skimmed. Some she read twice, then came an email with a subject line that made her heart skip. Book proposal, if you're ready to be louder. It was from a senior editor at a mid-sized publishing house. Someone who had stumbled upon Emma's post. The first lie was the silence. The editor had read every entry since, and saw not just a blog, but a story arc. They wanted to publish her memoir. At first, Emma laughed. A real laugh, the kind she hadn't tasted in months. She wasn't an author, she told herself. She was just someone who finally stopped pretending, but that voice, the one she used to silence, whispered back, "Why not you?" So she said yes. The writing wasn't hard. The living had been. Now the words simply poured. Page after page. Not just about Jason and the prenup, but about the little silences before it. The way women are taught to shrink. The nights she bit her tongue to keep peace. The days she doubted her own instincts. She called the book Signed with My Silence. When the cover proof arrived, minimalist, cream background, her initials in soft gold, she cried. Not because it was beautiful, but because it looked like her, the woman she was before and the one she had become. The memoir launched in spring. No flashy tour. No primetime interviews. Just word of mouth, readers sharing dog-eared pages, underlined sentences, quotes scribbled on fridge notes. You don't lose yourself all at once. You hand yourself over one compromise at a time. Love without respect is just performance. I thought the prenup was the betrayal. It wasn't. It was the mirror. The book climbed slowly, quietly. It reached bestseller lists not by scandal, but by sincerity. Jason noticed his business was floundering. Clients pulled out. A podcast episode dissected his downfall. Never naming him, but connecting the dots was easy. Local real estate forums called him the prenup guy. He tried to spin it, posted filtered videos about moving forward with grace, but the comments weren't kind. Meanwhile, Emma received an invitation to speak at a women's conference. She said yes. Then another. She spoke not as a victim, but as someone who finally chose herself in a world that had trained her not to. But not everyone cheered at a family gathering, one she didn't attend, but still heard about. Her aunt murmured. Why would she air dirty laundry like that? Her cousin messaged her, "You know Aunt Ruth says you embarrassed the whole family." Emma replied, "Funny, they weren't embarrassed when I was disappearing." It stung, yes, but only for a moment, because for every relative who shook their head, 10 strangers stood beside her at a book signing. A woman in her 60s clutched Emma's hand and whispered, "I stayed for 40 years. Your story helped me leave." Another slid her a note that said, "You saved me a decade of silence." Emma never posted about the backlash. She didn't need to defend herself. She'd already lived it. She understood now. Her silence had once protected Jason's image. Her voice now protected others. She no longer needed applause, but the echo, that mattered, and it was growing. The email came just past midnight. Can we talk? No greeting. No punctuation. Just 5 words that sat in her inbox like a ghost knocking at her door. Emma stared at it for a long time. She read it once, twice, then again. Not because she didn't understand, but because she knew exactly what it meant. Jason wanted a scene. A final act. Some neat cinematic ending to tie a bow on his guilt. But life wasn't a movie. And she wasn't his resolution. Still, she replied, tomorrow. 4 p.m. Magnolia Cafe. Not for him. For her. The air was crisp that afternoon, the kind of early autumn chill that made coffee feel like comfort. Emma arrived early, sat at the corner table by the window, ordered chamomile, no sugar. Jason walked in 3 minutes late. He scanned the room like he expected to be ambushed, then spotted her. When their eyes met, she didn't smile. She didn't frown either. She just waited. He looked smaller, not physically, just less somehow. The edges of his confidence had dulled. His once carefully groomed stubble now looked like he'd just forgotten to shave. His shirt was wrinkled. He sat down without a word. Silence stretched. Finally, he cleared his throat. You look well. Emma nodded. I am. Another pause. I didn't think you'd come. She raised an eyebrow. Then why ask? Jason sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know. I guess I thought we should talk. Face to face. I think we've already said a lot, she replied, voice calm. I know, he said quickly, but he paused again, fumbling for the right tone. I didn't expect you to actually go through with it. The divorce. The blog. The book. Emma tilted her head. You thought I'd stay quiet forever? He shrugged. I thought you needed me. Her eyes narrowed. Not in anger, in clarity. I did, she said. I needed someone to believe in me, to value me, to stand beside me, not in front of me. Jason's face twitched like he was about to argue, then thought better of it. Emma leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the table. But it turns out, it wasn't you. He looked down at his coffee. You really meant every word in that book. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sipped her tea. Then I meant every silence I broke. Jason looked like he was searching for a version of her that no longer existed. The Emma who apologized first, who made herself smaller to make him feel bigger. But that Emma had packed her things, found her voice, and never looked back. I wasn't trying to ruin you, he said quietly. She smiled, not kindly, not cruelly. Just finally. I wasn't trying to ruin you either. I was trying to save me. He swallowed hard. I guess I just didn't think you'd be able to. Emma stood. That's the thing about underestimating someone. You never see them coming until they're already gone. He didn't follow her out. He just sat there, looking like a man who had lost something he never truly understood. Outside, the wind picked up. Emma pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders and breathed in. There was no applause, no cinematic music, just the sound of her own footsteps, steady and sure, fading into the rhythm of a life that no longer needed permission. Closure, she realized, wasn't always a handshake or a shared tear. Sometimes, closure was a full heart and a clean walk away. 1 year to the day. Not of the prenup, not of the divorce, but of the moment Emma chose. Herself, she stood barefoot on the porch of a cedar cabin, nestled between a quiet lake and the kind of trees that hummed when the wind moved. Through them just right. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the clouds in hues of gold and apricot. She smiled, holding a mug of warm ginger tea. watching the women she'd invited begin to gather in a circle near the fire pit. They were strangers once, now bound by shared ache and emerging strength. Women in their 20s, 50s, 60s, some still grieving, some rebuilding, all of them survivors of something invisible from the outside but deeply real within. Emma called the retreat Signed for Myself. It wasn't a business. It wasn't therapy. It was space. Honest space. For journaling. For laughter. For silence that healed instead of hurt. She hadn't planned to host something like this. But after the book release and the emails, hundreds of them from women who had lived variations of her story, it just felt right. Like the next chapter had always been waiting. After dinner, the women shared stories. Not polished speeches, just soft truths. I thought I was too old to start over. I didn't know love could suffocate. I thought if I kept giving, he'd finally stay. Emma didn't speak much. She listened. And when they looked to her, she offered not answers, but understanding. When the fire dimmed, they scattered. Some went to the dock. Others stayed toasting marshmallows under stars. Emma walked quietly to her writing nook, a screened-in gazebo with fairy lights wrapped around the beams, and opened her journal. 1 year ago, he handed me a contract. I gave him my signature and a story he'll never forget. She smiled as she wrote it, not in bitterness, but in reverence. That chapter was over, but its power lingered, not in him, but in her. A cardinal landed on the railing. Briefly, before fluttering away, she flipped to a fresh page. This one would begin the new novel, not memoir. Fiction this time, but threaded with the truths she had earned. A story about a woman who ran away and ended up finding her voice in a place where no one thought to look. Her publisher was thrilled. The advance had already cleared. But the money wasn't the win. The win was this. She could finally create without shrinking. Earlier that morning, a woman at the retreat had asked her gently, "Do you ever regret writing the blog? Going public?" And the thought about it, the backlash, the gossip, the relatives who stopped calling, the people who accused her of being too much, of weaponizing her story. Then she thought about the woman who came to the first retreat, silent and left. Humming again, she answered, "No, I regret staying quiet for so long." Later that night, Emma lit a candle. One single wick in a mason jar. She didn't cry. She didn't toast. She didn't post it on social media. She just sat with it. Her anniversary, not of what ended, but of what began. 12 months ago, she'd stood in her kitchen holding a prenup, her heart thudding with confusion and shame. She'd spent that night staring at the ceiling, wondering how a man could look her in the eye and ask for loyalty while withholding love. She'd thought she was losing everything. She hadn't known, not then, that she was about to gain everything that mattered. Now. She woke up in a home she chose, made coffee for herself, walked barefoot because she could. Her calendar wasn't filled with his meetings. It was filled with life. Tomorrow, she would hike with 3 women from the group who'd never been on a trail before. Next week, she'd speak at a college campus about self-worth and storytelling. In a month, she'd submit the first 3 chapters of her novel to her editor, and every day, she would wake up knowing this. She didn't just survive. She rewrote the ending. Sometimes people still asked her about the Prenup story. At readings. At signings. Even in line at the market, once Emma never gave them the whole version, she'd just smile and say, "He handed me a contract. I gave him my signature and a story he'll never forget." And then she'd walk away, not out of pride, but because some truths don't need repetition, they just need living.